This movie, man. And you're about to see what I mean firsthand. First eyeball. In fact, your eyeballs may be bleeding after this. I don't know. I can't promise nothing. Shirt check. The Collector is one of the most brutal horror movies I've seen in a while. I mean, if it fits under the category of slasher, then yeah, it's kind of a given. It was a tough watch, but anything for you guys. Serving my pookies video by video. Let's get scarred together. You know what they say, families who get scarred together stay together. So our main character of this film, this disaster piece, his name is Arkin O'Brien. And he's part of a construction crew that's working on this super rich guy's house. And it is a nice house. Nice house. Woo. But his crew has obviously worked for this guy before because the owner of the house, Mr. Chase, he knows Arkin by name. So Arkin over here is just finishing up the job. He's inside the house fixing a door for Mr. Chase, and then he's gonna go and put some wrought iron, bars on the windows. And the Chase family consists of Mr. Chase, Mrs. Chase, and 2 daughters, the oldest one being a teenager named Jill, and the youngest being a little kid named Hannah. And while Arkin's there, you know, on the job, Hannah invites him for a little bit of a tea party. A little spot of tea. But, you know, Arkin's chill with it because he also has a daughter, and Hannah's same age, named Cindy. And we meet their older daughter shortly thereafter, when she kind of sneaks home and insists on a drag from Arkin's cigarette. Now, the Chase family, they're rich as hell, and as rich as hell people do, they're just about to leave on a family vacation, so they're getting some house repairs the day of, I guess. Except, of course, Jill, being the teenage brat she is, I guess, she does not want to go. Anywho, after Arkin and his crew finish up at the Chase's house, he goes to meet up with his wife and daughter, or ex-wife and daughter. It's not very clear, but what is clear is that she's pissed at him. Because apparently she has loan sharks at her tail, and they're demanding that she pays a certain amount of money by midnight that same day. Arkin gives her what he made that day from the Chase's house, but it's not nearly enough, and she's freaking out and pissed at Arkin. And she's telling him, this money is not enough to cover it, I need way more, and by midnight of that same day. And since Arkin pretty much spent the whole day with his construction crew at the Chase's, it's pretty much nearing evening by this point, so But Arkin has a plan that has been brewing for quite some time. So he tells his wife, or ex-wife, estranged wife, I don't know. Anyway, he tells Lisa, like, don't freak out, don't worry, I'll get you that money, and by midnight somehow. Don't worry, I have a plan. So he parts ways with Lisa and his daughter, and meets up with a pretty shady connection of his, a guy named Roy, who seems like he has a lot of connections of his own. Roy and his shady squad of delinquents, they've been casing the Chase house, the Chase Manor house, for quite some time, because they know that, yeah, the Chases are very rich, but also that Mr. Chase has a mighty expensive jewel or gemstone or rock hidden in a safe in his house. Information that he's most likely gleaned from Arkin, given that Arkin's been inside the house on multiple construction crews past. And not only has Arkin been inside the Chase house multiple times, but apparently he's also very good at cracking safes, and is one of the only people who can crack the particular wall safe that Mr. Chase has. So Arkin tells Roy that they need to break into the house and get that gemstone, that jewel, tonight, and ASAP. And though Roy doesn't want to rush it, Arkin is insistent, and they negotiate a 40-60 type deal. And plus, the Chases have just left on their family vacation, the house should be good and empty. Cut and dry, right? So at nightfall, Arkin puts on a balaclava, as you do, and he sneaks up to the Chase house with his little toolkit and picklock set, and on his way over to the house, he almost gets mauled by this vicious dog that's being chained up in the yard, but he dodges it, so he's fine. So he picks the front lock and gains entrance to the house, which seems, you know, dark and empty, as it would if the family's on vacation, right? And he heads upstairs to where he discovered the wall safe to be. One that's been concealed under a mirror that kind of just hinges up. Fancy. So Arkin's at the wall safe, he's got the mirror flicked up, he's all ready to go, and he gets out his gadgets for safe cracking and puts them on there. But right as he's about to get to business, he hears footsteps in the house, which obviously freaks him out because this is supposed to be an empty house. So he quickly snatches his gadgets and pulls the mirror back down, and then he rushes into a hall closet, just in the nick of time. Ugh. Except this person doesn't look to be one of the Chases. Unless Mr. Chase likes skulking around a dark house with a mask on. So the masked man, who didn't see Arkin, goes back to what he was doing around the house. And so Arkin's like, oh hell, there is someone home, I need to get the hell out of here. So he sneaks out of the hall closet and to the back door, except the back door has multiple deadbolts on it, and each one requires a circular key. So Arkin's not getting out that way. Just then, the masked man, who still does not know Arkin's there, he heads down to the basement. So now that Arkin's alone and on an extreme time crunch, he rushes back upstairs back to the wall safe. But as he's making his second attempt to crack the wall safe and get that jewel stone, he hears some blood-curdling screams. So he has to abort his second attempt, and he rushes over to a hall closet to hide because he can hear someone getting closer. And just as Arkin makes it to the closet, and before he can even close the door, a bloody, beaten Mr. Chase is thrown to the ground of the same room. So Mr. Chase sees Arkin and obviously recognizes him, and he's like, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to us?" Because whatever's going on, I guess it would be safe to assume that Arkin would be involved since he's there. And Arkin's trying to frantically shush him, like, shut up, I'm not involved, shh. And right as Mr. Chase gets up and grabs some type of weapon, that action sets off a tripwire or mechanism or booby trap that tangles a cord around Mr. Chase's leg, drags him above the stairwell, and then drops him. I'm sure Mr. Chase is feeling that. And although probably terribly winded, Mr. Chase is still alive, but then he's subsequently dragged away by the masked man, who still does not know of Arkin's presence. And now Arkin is real desperate to get out. He's like, screw the jewel, screw the gem, I need to get the hell out of here. But then he realizes that all the doors are locked, and all the windows have been boarded up. So Arkin realizes he's very much trapped inside this house, and trapped inside whatever is unfolding within it. So he sees a phone and grabs it, probably to call the police. But right as he puts the receiver to his ear, a type of pin or nail jabs into his ear. Ugh. Which is such a petty type of booby trap. Like, oh, you're gonna call the police? That's what you get. And then Arkin rushes over to the window, grabs the boards to try and pry them off, and just as he reaches his hand through the boards, these razor blade jaws clamp down on his fingers. It's kind of like that game with the alligators, where you gotta like reach in before they bite you. But a little more extreme version of that. So these razor blades are clamped down on either side of his hand, and he has to yank his hand out and probably scrape so much skin off in the process. Ew. And now his knuckles are hella gashed. Cause have you ever even touched a razor blade? They're so sharp. I am scared of razor blades. And X-Acto knives. And kind of just knives in general. So with his hand all gashed up now, Arkin rushes into an adjoining room, narrowly missing a tripwire connected to a suspended board of nails. That would have whoosh. So hearing the masked man's footsteps kind of approaching the downstairs area, Arkin sneaks into another room where he narrowly misses having his head practically cut off because it's a room strewn with razor wire. And luckily for Arkin, all he does is graze his cheek with it. Where does one acquire razor wire? And right after getting his cheek grazed, he has to maneuver through another room littered with open and ready bear traps. And he has to be real quiet because the masked man is now downstairs and obviously is not aware of Arkin's presence. And given how psychotic this guy seems, Arkin would like to keep it that way. And not only does Arkin have to remain silent as he's trying to tiptoe his way through the house, he also has to be constantly vigilant of any hidden tripwires, because it seems like they're everywhere. This masked man loves his tripwires. So what should have been a quick and easy jewel thieving expedition has dropped Arkin in the center of this booby-trapped house of horrors, this nightmare hellscape. And it was supposed to be an easy gig, one that he could get completed by midnight and get Lisa the money she needed, but here we are. So unable to find any sort of escape on the main floor, Arkin slips down into the basement, when he's sure the masked man has left it. And in the basement, there Arkin finds Mr. Chase all bloodied and beaten up and looks like he was tortured, strapped to a chair and screaming his guts out now that Arkin has approached him. And Arkin has to hurriedly shush him, like, shut up, I'm not involved, I'm here to help you. I'm gonna try and help you. I don't know what's going on, but I'm here to help. Then Mr. Chase starts begging Arkin to go get his wife and find his daughter Hannah. Apparently Jill is not home because before the family went on their vacation, since Jill did not want to go, she snuck out and ditched them, so it was just gonna be them three on vacation. Who knows where Jill is, but she's not at home. Thank goodness for Jill. And Mr. Chase also tells Arkin, go get my handgun, it's in a wall safe that Arkin may or may not know about already. And Mr. Chase tells him the combo is 15-24/7. So if the circumstances were a little different, that would be like a dream come true for Arkin, because now he knows the actual combo to the safe he was trying to crack earlier. So Arkin enters the adjoining bathroom in the basement, where Mr. Chase said Mrs. Chase was being kept, and there Arkin finds her bound and gagged in the bathtub. So Arkin takes out her gag, and he's about to remove the tape from over her eyes when he realizes the duct tape is being pinned into her skin, with clothespins. So he's like, yeah, I might have to leave that on for a little bit. And the wife is obviously freaked the hell out, because who the hell would not be, okay? But the wife tells him that the intruder or masked man, the psychopath, hasn't found or discovered or realized that their youngest daughter, Hannah, is in the house. And she's the same little girl that Arkin had that little tea party with earlier in the day before everything went to hell. So Miss Chase implores Arkin to go find her and rescue her. So in order to do this, Arkin tells Miss Chase that she needs to scream to lure the masked psycho down into the basement so Arkin can sneak out and not run into him upstairs. And of course, Miss Chase is very wary of this and begrudging, but she complies for the safety of her daughter. So she ends up screaming. The masked man comes downstairs. Arkin slips upstairs, except the masked man is not too happy once he gets there and not too pleased at the commotion. Everyone say hi to Leroy. So Arkin goes on a frantic search upstairs for Hannah, but he cannot find her anywhere. So he heads to the safe for the gun, and now that he's got that combo, opening the safe is like a breeze. So he gets the gun and pockets it, not a moment before he sees that very jewel that he came for, the jewel that he was unknowingly risking his neck to get. And there she is, in the flesh. Beautiful. So of course, understandably, he pockets that as well. I mean, if he ends up helping and trying to save the Chases, he needs a little reward, right? Mr. Chase also told Arkin that the bullet box, whatever, would be in the bottom drawer of their bedroom, but when Arkin gets there, the bullet box is completely out of ammo. So that's great. That's a good omen right there. What use is a gun if you have no bullets? Besides being able to pistol whip someone, I guess. And just after Arkin finds that empty bullet box, he hears a bunch of thudding from an adjoining room. So thinking it could be Hannah, he opens up the doors, but instead of finding Hannah in there, he finds this big red trunk or chest, and when he opens it, this bloodied, enfeebled man named Larry spills out of it, pretty much. And after introducing himself as Larry, he hurriedly tells Arkin that this masked guy, he collects people, killing the ones he doesn't want. And then Larry starts hurriedly, frantically rambling that if Arkin isn't chosen for the collection, he'll never leave this house alive. He'll never leave this. And as Larry's going on and on about it and freaking out, Arkin's shoving him back in the chest, back in the trunk. I mean, because if he leaves Larry out, it's gonna be obvious to the masked guy that there's someone else running loose around the house. And Arkin doesn't want to give up his cover for some old dude named Larry. So after he's got Larry locked back inside that trunk, and the doors of the room shut, because Arkin's all about leaving no trace, Arkin heads back upstairs to look for Hannah, and he has a good guess that the masked man is still in the basement because now he can hear Mr. Chase screaming. So, at least that helps him know where the masked psycho is, right? And as Arkin is continuing his search for Hannah upstairs, he comes across a room that has an open window. Oh my gosh, she's killing my arm. Ugh. You see this? This is from holding Leroy all the time. Anyway. So of course, seeing a room with an open window, Arkin rushes inside, stepping onto a floor coated with super sticky ooey gooey, highly acidic ooze or some type of acidic substance, and his shoes are immediately stuck to the sticky substance, and it straight away starts burning through the soles of his shoe. Like, does this masked guy work at a chemical plant or something? This guy's crazy. What? And, there's also a cat involved in this scene, but it's so horrific, I'm not even gonna say. We're just gonna leave it at that. Okay. Let's pretend the cat was not even there. Anyway, as Arkin is quickly trying to free himself, he happens to knock over a couple of books onto the floor, and those crashes and bumps from upstairs garner the masked man's attention, who is now downstairs, or as we're gonna call him from henceforth, the Collector. I mean, that's what Larry called him, so. So after hearing these crashes and bumps, the Collector is now headed upstairs. So Arkin quickly bends down, unties his shoes, and steps out of them onto the books that he dropped on the floor by accident, so. And Arkin makes it over to the bed and gets on it and reaches back to pry his shoes off the floor to leave no trace, leave no trace. And he ends up throwing a book over the other because it's too far to reach. And Arkin manages to hide under the pillows and other coverings on the bed just as the Collector arrives. And needless to say that open window was also booby-trapped. And, the cat ended up triggering it. The Collector just assumes that the thumping and thudding was due to the cat. And right in that moment, Larry starts tapping and pounding on the trunk he's trapped in, which thankfully draws the Collector's attention away from that room. And the Collector heads downstairs to go to the trunk and kick at it. Shut up, Larry! Although he doesn't speak. In fact, the Collector makes these kind of strangled, squealy screech kind of noises. It's just so weird because he's just a guy, right? So Arkin maneuvers out of the ooey gooey acid room and sneaks his way back down to the basement to talk to Mr. Chase and his wife. Except when he goes down to the basement again, he finds Mr. Chase dead, and very dead, to the point where Mr. Chase's innards are now outwards. So that's lovely. So Arkin heads into the bathroom where Miss Chase is being kept, and he finally just rips that tape off. And as he's untying Mrs. Chase, he tells her that he cannot find Hannah anywhere in the house, and that he's unsure that Hannah is even in the house at all. And then Mrs. Chase inquires about her husband. Like, is he okay? Is Michael okay? And Arkin's like, yeah, he's fine. But before he escorts her out of the bathroom, he tells Mrs. Chase, like, keep close to me and keep your eyes on my back, because they're gonna have to pass by Mr. Chase's body. and it is not a pretty sight. And he tells her she's got to be real silent as well. But of course, as Arkin is escorting her in the room, past where Mr. Chase is, Mrs. Chase looks up and sees her disemboweled husband and starts freaking out and panicking, which understandable, I guess. And she's so panicked and spooked that she ditches Arkin and runs up the basement stairs, being very noisy about it as well. And when she throws open the basement door, the collector is waiting on the other side, and waiting with a knife, which he then proceeds to stab through her gut over and over again. So Mrs. Chase tumbles back down the basement stairs, and Arkin rushes off to hide, scrambling under a desk right as the collector comes back downstairs. And from where Arkin is hiding, he gets a clear view of the collector's belt as the collector walks by, and he sees that the collector is wearing a key ring, which, you know, he assumes has all the keys to the locks that have been put around the doors in the house. And this is also where we get our first clear close-up of the collector's face. Or more so his mask and those creepy little beady eyes of his. And then the collector starts dragging Mrs. Chase away, and by this point she's still alive, and he drags her back to the bathroom, which gives Arkin the opportunity to rush back upstairs. And right then, Arkin hears a horn beep from outside, and sees that it is Chase's oldest daughter, Jill, returning home with her boyfriend. And Jill brought her boyfriend back, obviously expecting the house to be empty because her family's supposed to be on vacation, right? And by this point, it's raining, so Arkin is trying to yell out through the little gaps in the window, like, "Go back, Jill, get away from here!" But the rain is too loud and she can't hear him. So Jill is a little confuddled when her key doesn't work in the main lock, and so Jill and her boyfriend head around to the back door. But the collector is very much aware of Jill and her boyfriend's newfound presence, so he rushes over to the back door and with that circular key of his, unlocks all the deadbolts so Jill and her boyfriend can get inside. Because he'd has found 2 new playthings. So Jill and her boo come in through the back door and start making out in the kitchen, completely oblivious to the housecape further out in the house, because to be fair, the house is pretty dark, so they're not seeing much of anything. Yet. And as Jill and her bae are making out, the collector comes down to watch. Perv. And he's kind of just there frothing at the mouth, waiting for his traps to be triggered by them. So Arkin needs to warn them, but he doesn't want to make his presence known because the collector still doesn't know he's in the house, which is quite impressive. So Arkin sneaks past the collector into the kitchen, kind of army crawls under the table to get closer to Jill and her boo and try to warn them, but that's right as the collector appears before Jill and her boyfriend, freaking both of them out. And his appearance is already horrifying enough, but he's also holding one of his damn little throwing knives. So the collector attacks the boyfriend and starts scuffling with him, working the boyfriend towards the room full of bear traps, and shoving the boyfriend into it. Jill's boo steps into the first bear trap, and then falls backward into the rest, where they all snap shut around him and end up killing him. Because, you know, one on his head, so yeah. Then the collector goes after Jill, and while he's attacking her and throwing her around, he relocks all the circular deadbolts, so now they're extra stuck. And Jill's able to pull out her phone and dial 911, but he knocks it out of her hand before she can ever say a single word to them. But it's still something, right? So as the collector is distracted by tying Jill up to the railing, Arkin is able to pry a few boards off the window before sneaking to set an alarm clock, which then goes off, and the collector rushes upstairs to find out what the source of the noise is. So after the collector runs upstairs, Arkin has time to get to Jill and untie her, and she's being tied up with barbed wire. But he manages to cut her loose, and Jill recognizes Arkin because, you know, he's been at the house a few times. But even still, she's not really listening to him and is too freaked out, and despite his whispered warnings, stop, be quiet, she goes over and grabs a pair of scissors, maybe for some self-defense if the collector comes back. But because Jill is so lucky, the scissors are also booby-trapped. Of course, everything is. Which triggers a wire that snatches around her wrist and propels her against a wall of nails. So now Jill is also very dead, just like her dad. And her boyfriend. So at the commotion, the collector comes back into the room to admire his handiwork. His new Jill wall art, if you will. And Arkin slips into the room that has the trunk with Larry in it, and he opens the trunk and is trying to get Larry out, but Larry is attached to the trunk by 2 hooks through each of his feet, or 1 in each. Ugh. So Larry is very attached to the trunk, and because Larry is very attached to the trunk, Arkin has to dip and ditch him when he hears the collector coming. So Arkin manages to get back upstairs, smashes an upstairs window, and climbs out onto the porch roof. And from the porch roof, he jumps to the ground, which, oof. I mean, it's worth it to get out of there, but ugh, I could just feel my knees shatter, or my ankles shatter. But apparently Arkin's knees and ankles stay intact because he starts sprinting away. But when he looks back at the house, he sees that little girl, Hannah, in the upstairs window pounding on it for Arkin's attention, like, "Help, Arkin, help!" And Arkin can see that the collector's downstairs, but has taken notice of Hannah's noises upstairs. Where was Hannah before? Because I'm pretty sure Arkin was calling out her name, or whisper calling. So... And Arkin has just freed himself from that hellscape. But he decides to head back inside to save that little girl. Because while Arkin may be a jewel thief, he's a good guy at heart. So as Arkin is working to get back in the house, Hannah sprints downstairs and witnesses the Collector trying to shove Larry back in that trunk. Poor Larry, man. He's just some innocent guy that the Collector kidnapped and added to his collection, I guess. But when Hannah sprints by the Collector, he sees her, and he begins chasing after her, while simultaneously making those weird, strangled, screechy, squealy sounds. And that's when Arkin, who has obviously made his way back into the house, hits the Collector over the head with that gun. So I guess even empty guns can serve a purpose. And Arkin grabs Hannah and locks them both in what turns out to be her bedroom. And then there's the Collector banging on the door like crazy. Ew. And as the Collector is frantically bashing at the door, Arkin comes up with a spur-of-the-moment plan. And so he tells Hannah she has to stay off the floor at all costs. And so Hannah gets up on the TV cabinet with the TV turned on and perched at the edge. And Arkin is over by the massive fish tank she has in her room, which rich people things, I guess, and is perched behind it, waiting to knock it over. So their plan is obviously to try and electrocute the Collector when he inevitably bashes in the door and comes rushing in. So right as the Collector busts the door open, Arkin tells her, "Now!" And she pushes the obviously plugged in, turned on TV off of the cabinet onto the floor, right as Arkin pushes over the fish tank with all the little fishies inside. Ugh. So the floor gets flooded with water and electrocuted water, but given that the Collector is the booby trap master himself, he anticipated it being a trap. So right as the door busts open and then the TV's pushed and simultaneously the water, the Collector has Larry with him and throws Larry into the electrocuted water. Larry cannot catch a break, man. So Larry gets electrocuted instead of the Collector. And the Collector even steps on Larry's dead electrocuted body so he doesn't step in the water as he's hurling his throwing knives at Arkin and trying to hit him. But Arkin manages to dodge them and grabs Hannah and locks them both in the adjoining bathroom. But right as Arkin locks him in the bathroom, he finds out a moment too late that the bathroom is strewn with hanging fish hooks. And they barb right into his face and I think one in his ear. But luckily for Hannah, she is too short to have reached them, so she's fine. And as Arkin is unbarbing and unhooking the hooks from his face and his ear and the Collector, ever charming, picks up Larry's body and is using his head as kind of a battering ram for the bathroom door. The Collector just exudes so much class and grace and sophistication. Amid the Larry head door pounding, Hannah points out a laundry chute in the bathroom, so Arkin quickly sends Hannah down the chute and is about to follow when the Collector breaks down the door. And then he starts tackling Arkin, accompanied by that hoarse, squealing, screeching sound he makes. So the both of them are going at it, but amid the struggle, Arkin manages to rip the mask off the Collector's face, and although we don't see the face, Arkin does, and he seems to recognize the person. That is, right before the Collector knocks him out cold. And then it cuts to Arkin strewn up by his hands down in the basement, and following the Collector's history of class and elegance, he wakes Arkin up by slicing his forehead. So Arkin wakes up with his hands suspended above him, but his hands are being held up by meat hooks or fish hooks that are being jabbed into his flesh. And he also has the same fish hooks barbed into his back, kind of holding him to the wall. And Arkin is pleading with the Collector to let the little girl go, to let Hannah go, but I don't think the Collector's listening too well. He's more preoccupied with his torture instruments, which he then uses to come over and knock Arkin's back molar out. Ding, 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 ew. And that's when Arkin looks over and realizes that Hannah is in the basement with him, hiding under the same desk that he was hiding under before. Which, of all places, why would you hide in the basement? But whatever. So Arkin has to keep the Collector's attention on him, so it stays away from the desk, which has Hannah underneath it. So he starts hurling a string of insults at him, and it seems to piss the Collector off a bit, to the extent where the Collector goes and grabs a jar of cockroaches, lifts up Arkin's shirt, holds the open jar of cockroaches to his stomach, and then puts a flame underneath them so they start digging into Arkin's skin. But thankfully that torture doesn't last too long because a cop car pulls up to the house. And it's responding to the 911 call Jill was able to place before the phone was knocked from her hand. So now the Collector's aware of the officer's arrival. And as the officer goes up to the house and shines his flashlight in the front window, he sees the room with all those bear traps and the boyfriend's dead body now clamped in those bear traps, and he's like, what the hell? What am I dealing with here? So now the officer's on very high alert and calls for backup, because this is very much a backup type situation. But as the officer walks around the house, he comes across the Collector, who came out from behind a tree in a dramatic reveal. And the officer yells at the Collector to put the knife down. And as the Collector actually drops the knife, that's when the officer is attacked by that chained up dog. And it obviously belongs to the Collector, because as the Collector whistles, the dog stops the attack. Back in the basement, Arkin manages to rip his hands free, uses one of the hooks to undo his handcuffs, and then rips himself free from the hooks in his back. Arkin's gonna come out of this house absolutely minced meat. But then back outside, the collector has just broken the officer's neck. So their one hope is kind of in the dirt. Dead in the dirt. And who knows how long backup will take. So now that Arkin has freed himself in the worst way possible, he heads into the bathroom to see if Mrs. Chase is okay, but Mrs. Chase is not okay. She's actually in the bathtub, dead, with her mouth sewn shut. But worse still, she's holding a detonator. And that is when Arkin realizes that the collector plans on blowing up the whole house. So back outside, the collector goes to the cop car and grabs the cop's rifle, which is great. Because if the collector was this dangerous with just throwing knives, imagine him with a gun. But as the collector heads back to the house, he sees that Arkin is now freed and that he's trying to escape with Hannah. So now the collector is pissed, and he re-enters the house with that vicious dog at his side. And the collector sends the dog after them, but Arkin manages to get them both up the laundry chute in the nick of time. So now they're in the upstairs bathroom. So Arkin stuffs the trash can with some toilet paper and lights it ablaze. And just as the dog arrives at the bathroom door to attack them, Arkin opens it and shoves the flaming trash can on the dog's face, and he subsequently kills it. And then Arkin heads back downstairs for one final boss battle with the collector. And Arkin plows into him and knocks the rifle from the collector's hands and sends it skittering down the basement steps down into the basement. After throwing several punches with each other and throwing each other around the kitchen, Arkin ends up kicking the collector down into the basement, and Arkin locks the door. And right then the collector realizes that his key ring is missing, that they were dropped during the scuffle, and Arkin takes notice of them and picks them up. So Arkin finally has the key ring, but now the collector has the rifle again. I don't know if that was a very good trade. But just as Arkin carries Hannah over to the back door with all those circular deadbolts, they realize that the keys have all been broken. On purpose, of course. And just at that same moment, the collector shoots the basement door open and is now free again. But as the collector approaches them by the door where he sees them crouched together, we get a glimpse through his eyes and we see that he has very poor vision. Relatable. So when the collector shoots at what looks to be Hannah and Arkin crouching by the door, he actually shoots a mirror that Arkin set up. One that's displaying their reflection from across. And Arkin had positioned the mirror in front of the door, so now the door has been blown open. So the collector is confuddled, but he has been lured right where Arkin wants him, and Arkin pulls a tripwire right next to him, which drops a chandelier of knives directly on the collector, who is directly underneath them. So amid the collector's screeches of pain, Hannah and Arkin rush out the broken door and head the hell out of that house, but we see the collector gets back up. He's not gravely injured, unfortunately. But right as Arkin and Hannah make it outside, they can hear the sound of multiple police cars approaching and all the sirens. So backup has finally arrived. Woo! And as the police are speeding over, Arkin leaves Hannah in the bushes and then jumps out on the road in front of them like, guys, help, we need help! So he's subsequently hit by the police car because it didn't have time to stop. I don't know what he was thinking. I guess he was desperate. But the police all stop there and Hannah is brought to safety and Arkin is put in the ambulance just as that beautiful house explodes and obliterates all the evidence of the happenings within. And then a cop is questioning Arkin in the ambulance, and Arkin tells him that the guy he saw when he ripped the mask off his face, it was one of the exterminators who had been at the house earlier that day. Probably the very one that Arkin had spoken to. I think it was that little creep. So that little creep is the collector. So Arkin's ambulance takes off toward the hospital, and Arkin still has that rock or that jewel in his pocket. So he got a little something out of that hellscape, the night from hell. And he asked the paramedic, like, what time is it? Because Lisa needed that money before midnight. And the paramedic tells him that it's just before midnight. So Arkin's like, call Lisa, I need you to call my wife, I need to call her. Because there's still time to get that money, I guess, even though he's in terrible condition. But just as he's asking the paramedic to call his wife, that's when the collector's extermination van crashes into the ambulance and sends it flipping over head over heels multiple times. And Arkin is still strapped in the gurney and now upside down in the upside down ambulance, just as the back doors are yanked open by the collector. And the paramedic is still alive, but only for another moment because the collector comes over and stabs him through the eye. And then he cuts Arkin free and drags Arkin out of the ambulance and over to the extermination van of his. And as he hauls Arkin up into it, he shoves him in that now empty red trunk from the house where Larry was previously, shoves him in and locks him inside. And then the collector slams the back door shut, rips off the fake extermination company logo, and speeds away into the rainy night. And then it fades to black. And you know, while this movie was very brutal, it was indeed a very fun one. And, well, not fun in the sense that people were tortured and killed, okay? I'm not a complete psycho. Yet. So if you have a strong stomach and want your eyes to bleed, I recommend giving this one a watch because, you know, it's actually a pretty cool movie. It's a pretty cool story and a cool premise, so... I mean, there are some gnarly, gruesome scenes in here, so take that as you will, and take that as my warning for you, but... yeah. Yeah, you know what? Maybe don't watch it.